And this will bear on some of the things that Bernard was talking about last night. So I want to introduce you to Selma. Selma's 4 years old. And Elsa. Elsa's 4 months old. If colleges and universities, as we know them, still exist in 2 decades, Selma will be in the class of 2028, and Elsa will be in the class of 2032. And if there are jobs in teaching, one of you might well be teaching them. Now, a brief timeout as we begin. I want you to imagine 20 years ahead. And if Selma or Elsa is in your class, I want you to imagine what you will be teaching them and how you will be teaching them. I have other worries. Not about the future, but about the present. I worry that we are not teaching you what you need to know and how you will need to read, write, and teach in 20 years. As Yogi said, making predictions is always risky, especially about the future. But here's a prediction about which I'm absolutely confident. If you are teaching 20 years from now, you will not be teaching what we now are teaching you, and you will not be teaching how we now are teaching. And to underscore this point, I would like to introduce you to one of Selma's and Elsa's friends. His name is Luke. We'll start, Jeff.
It did 5 minutes ago.
What?
It did 5 minutes ago.
So what do I do to get it? So,
It's terrifying.
well, we can live without it, but I'd like it to be. Selma, Elsa, Luke. Those are going to be your students. If you do not begin to make unavoidable changes in higher education, you will fail yourselves, and you will fail our granddaughters. What I would like to convey to you, though, this evening are not only the looming problems for higher education, but the enormous opportunities awaiting those who can divine the messages surrounding us. It's difficult to know where to begin. But I'll start with some facts, some hard facts, that people in higher education, or most people in higher education, either ignore or don't realize. The financial structure of higher education as we now know it is unsustainable. In 2030, Elsa's time, a Columbia education will cost $5,888,992. That's right, more than $500,000. 5 years later, in 2035, it will cost $788,000. These are the charts. And the way I derived this was to take the current cost of higher education, compound it at 6% over that period of time, which is on the low end of the estimates as to what the increase in the cost of higher education will be over the next few decades. And we I didn't, my wife did. We calculated that at 1 year, right, and 4-year costs for class entering now and class entering. So Elsa would be here. It's all right. 2030 would be Elsa, and Selma would be right up in here. It's not that far. That's not that far away in terms of all of What this means is that our son and his wife will have to pay $1.3 million just for the undergraduate education of their two daughters. Who will be able to afford such an education? And will students and their families think that the goods and services you are peddling are worth more than $500,000? These questions lead me to ask other questions. Where did the blueprint for the current structure of system of higher education come from? What are its presuppositions? Is it still functional, or has it become outdated? Why is the curriculum structured the way it is? Why are the courses structured the way they are? Why are all courses the same length? Why does graduation depend on accumulating a certain number of credits or passing a certain number of courses? And who came up with 32 courses or whatever it is for a degree? Why is a semester 12, 14 weeks long? Why is an undergraduate education 4 years? And how is all this related to the technological prostheses, without which we are not, as Bernard was saying last night, human? Models matter. Models not only represent the world, but they also shape it. And the model that has shaped the world of higher education for over 200 years was designed by Kant. And that's not just because I teach philosophy. There's a text published in 1798 called The Conflict of the Faculties. And this is the first paragraph. It's a stunning text. I think I've highlighted the points that I want to emphasize. Whoever it was that first hit upon the notion of a university and proposed that a public institution of this kind be established, it was not a bad idea to handle the entire content of learning by mass production. 1798. The model that he uses is mass production. We'll come back to that. By a division of labor, so that for every branch of the sciences there would be a public teacher or professor appointed as its trustee, and all these together would form the kind of learned community we call a university. The university would have a certain autonomy. The fundamental principle of Kant's entire philosophy is the principle of autonomy. And that pervades every aspect of his understanding of the university. We'll come back to that. Since only scholars can pass judgment upon scholars as such, that's the origin of the practice of peer review. One of the serious problems in higher education today, in my judgment. And accordingly, it would be authorized to perform certain functions through its faculties. Come back to that. University specialists in one of the main branches of learning. Specialization. To admit to the university students seeking entrance from the lower schools, gymnasia, whatever, and having conducted examinations by its own authority, again, autonomy. To grant degrees and confirm the university recognized status of doctor or free teacher. That is, teachers who are not members of the university. In other words, to create doctors. And then I won't read all this, but the note, each of these divisions has its own dean. Or the model of transfer to the military model in all of this. It's an extraordinarily, I find that an extraordinary statement. Principles of autonomy, 3 branches or divisions, peer review, which is a variation of autonomy, specialization. The structure is quantitative, linear, and hierarchical. Now I want to talk about architecture. And I'm going to talk about architecture in a variety of ways. I want to start by talking about the architecture of reason, or the architecture of knowledge. Right. Kant's first critique is Critique of Pure Reason, published in 1781. As some of you know, for Kant, the mind is hardwired. It has a structure that is universal. The structure of the mind is comprised of 2 things: the forms of sensible intuition, which are time and space, and the categories of the understanding, which are 12. He takes the categories of understanding listed here over from Aristotle. Right. But it's the structure, and this